My name is Evelyn Foster. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a logistics analyst for a shipping company in Valencia. Most of my life runs on structure. Spreadsheets, port schedules, late calls across time zones. Things that make sense if you follow them closely enough. I've always believed relationships should work the same way. If something starts to shift, even slightly, you notice it early. You fix it before it becomes something permanent. I was wrong. Daniel Carter is 29, my boyfriend. Or he was. We had been together for 3 years, engaged for 8 months. Long enough that our lives had blended into something that felt stable on the outside. Shared rent, shared routines. The same grocery list rewritten every Sunday. The wedding was set for early summer. Not huge, around 70 guests, but not cheap either. Daniel wanted it to feel expensive without looking like we were trying too hard. He had opinions about everything. The lighting, the flowers, the texture of the invitations. I can handle opinions. What wore me down was how he delivered them. Like every vendor should be grateful he even showed up. I picked up extra shifts to cover the costs. My company was short-staffed, so overtime was always available if you were willing to disappear into your desk. I told myself it was temporary, that it was for us. Daniel said he appreciated it, but what he really appreciated was what it allowed him to ask for next. Every time I told him how much I made that week, he would immediately suggest an upgrade. Better flowers, a larger bar package, a different photographer because the one we booked didn't have the right energy. If I hesitated, he'd sigh and say I was thinking too small. At home, things shifted in quieter ways. He was on his phone more, not casually, carefully, tilting the screen away when I walked by, smiling at something, then going blank when I asked what it was. He started dressing differently too. Not dramatically, but enough. Cologne on a random afternoon. A nicer shirt just to run errands. I didn't accuse him of anything, not because I trusted him completely, but because I didn't have anything solid. And I'm not the kind of person who interrogates someone just to calm my own thoughts. But I started noticing patterns. And once you notice patterns, you can't unsee them. Last week, I came home after a 12-hour shift and saw his laptop open on the couch. A notification flashed for less than a second, but I saw the name. Clara. I knew that name. Clara was his ex, the one he called toxic, the one he said he had blocked everywhere, the one he promised was completely out of his life. I stood there a little too long, not moving, not touching anything, just thinking. Daniel walked in from the kitchen and immediately snapped at me for hovering. I told him I was just tired, which was true. But it wasn't the whole truth anymore, because now I couldn't stop thinking about one simple thing. If she was blocked, why was her name still showing up on his screen? The next morning, I didn't bring it up. I made coffee, packed my lunch, left for work like nothing had changed. Daniel barely looked up from his phone. He asked if I could send him the login for the wedding venue portal. Said he wanted to double-check the seating chart. Not because anything was wrong, just because he liked circling problems until he found one. At work, I tried to focus, but my mind kept replaying that notification. Clara, a name that wasn't supposed to exist in our life anymore. Around midday, he texted me a list of new upgrades. A different cake tasting, linen napkins instead of paper, a photo booth because someone else's wedding had one. I stared at the message for a second before replying. We'll talk tonight. He sent back a thumbs down emoji, like I was the one being difficult. When I got home that night, the apartment was quiet. The bedroom door was mostly closed. Not fully, but just enough to say, "Don't come in." I could hear him laughing. Not casually. That specific kind of laugh people use when they want to impress someone. When I walked past, it stopped immediately. A minute later, he opened the door and stepped out with a neutral expression that didn't quite land. He said he was on the phone with a coworker, then asked why I was looking at him like that. I told him I wasn't. He shrugged. Then asked if I had saved the receipt for the florist deposit. I reminded him I paid it online last week. He rolled his eyes. Said I forget things. That was new too. Little comments. Small enough to ignore. Sharp enough to stay with you. After dinner, he took a shower and left his phone on the counter. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. Instead, I looked at his laptop again, not to search, not to dig, just to confirm something. And that's when I saw it. An email confirmation, a reservation for 2 at a restaurant I recognized, not one we had ever been to together. The name on the reservation was Daniel, and the note said, "Anniversary table if possible." I checked the date. Tomorrow night. The same night he told me he had a work dinner. My stomach dropped, but my face stayed calm. I took a photo of the screen with my phone. Then I closed the laptop exactly how I found it and walked back into the living room like nothing had happened. Because in that moment, I wasn't thinking about confronting him. I was thinking about something much simpler, something quieter, something that didn't feel emotional at all. I was thinking about timelines, contracts, refund policies, and exactly how much of this I could undo before it became permanent. The strange thing about betrayal is that when it first becomes real, it doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels administrative, like your mind refuses to break until it has finished sorting the facts. That night, Daniel came out of the bathroom smelling like expensive cologne and steam, still talking about uplighting and floral arrangements, like the world around him was intact. He kissed my cheek and asked if my overtime check had cleared yet. I told him it would hit on Friday. He smiled, leaned against the kitchen counter, and said, "Perfect. Then we can lock in the final upgrades and stop stressing." Stop stressing. I looked at him for a second longer than usual, at the easy way he said it, at the calm in his voice, at the complete absence of hesitation. Then I nodded. Inside my head, something shifted, not loudly, not in some explosive cinematic way, just a quiet internal click, the kind that happens when your emotions step aside and let your instincts take over. I didn't mention Clara. I didn't mention the reservation. I didn't ask him why the note said anniversary, or why the dinner happened to be scheduled for the exact same evening as his supposed work event. I just sat there while he kept talking about chair covers, signature cocktails, and whether the photographer we booked made people look too beige. Normally, I would have answered. Normally, I would have engaged, corrected, calculated. That night, I barely heard him because I was already somewhere else, not in the future we had planned. In the one that began the moment I understood I might be the only person in this relationship who still thought the wedding meant something. The next day, I went to work like usual. I answered emails, sat through a scheduling call, fixed a routing error involving a delayed container shipment from Marseille. On the outside, I was still myself. Inside, everything had narrowed. I kept checking the time. Daniel had told me his work dinner would start around 7. The reservation was for 8. At 12:14 in the afternoon, he texted me. Not to say he loved me, not to check in, not to ask how my day was going. He sent another list. He wanted upgraded table candles. A second tasting with a different bakery because the first one had been underwhelming. And he wanted me to transfer more money into the wedding account because the decorator said the premium fabric draping had to be confirmed that week. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I typed back, "We'll discuss it tonight." His reply came almost instantly. A single thumbs down emoji, nothing else. I actually laughed under my breath. Not because it was funny, because it was so absurdly childish that for a moment it didn't even feel real. I set my phone face down and went back to work. At 4:30, he sent another message. "Work dinner tonight, might run late. My team wants to try that new place across town. Wish me luck surviving 3 hours of office politics." A laughing emoji. A second later, a wine glass emoji. I read it twice. The restaurant in the reservation wasn't across town. It was 15 minutes from our apartment. That detail bothered me almost more than the cheating. Cheating is ugly enough on its own, but being lazy about the lie, being that comfortable with it, said something colder. It said he didn't think I would look closely, and that hurt in a different way, because he wasn't just being dishonest. He had quietly started treating me like someone too busy, too loyal, or too predictable to notice. At 6:20, I left work and drove home instead of toward the restaurant. I told myself I just wanted to see what he would do when he believed no one was watching. At 7:12, I parked half a block from our building. The living room lights were on. I stayed in the car with the engine off, my hands resting on the steering wheel, and watched our windows like they belonged to somebody else. At 7:24, the apartment door opened. Daniel stepped out, and whatever faint part of me had still been trying to excuse this finally went quiet. Because this was not a man heading to an awkward work dinner. He was dressed for a date. Dark-fitted shirt, the charcoal coat he only wore for special dinners. Hair styled instead of rushed. The watch I bought him for his last birthday, sitting clean and polished against his wrist. He paused outside the building and checked his reflection in his phone screen, then adjusted his collar, then smiled. Not a nervous smile, an anticipatory one. That was the moment that landed hardest. Not the cologne, not the clothes, the fact that he looked excited. He called a ride and waited by the curb like he had all the time in the world. I watched him get in. Then I waited another 10 minutes before starting the GK. Not because I was trying to tail him like some detective in a bad film. I just needed the last piece. Something solid enough that my mind could never argue with me later. Something that would keep me from doing that awful thing people do after betrayal, rewriting it into something smaller so they can survive it. The restaurant was easy to find. Valencia isn't so big that a lie can hide if you already know where to look. The outside terrace was busy. Warm lights, full tables, too much laughter. I parked across the street where I could see the entrance without being obvious. At exactly 8 o'clock, Daniel's car pulled up. He stepped out first. A woman was already standing near the entrance. Blonde hair pulled back, black dress, familiar posture. Clara. I had only seen photos before, but I knew immediately. And Daniel knew exactly where to go. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, no distance. He smiled the second he saw her. Really smiled. The kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. She stepped toward him. They hugged. Not like old friends reconnecting by accident. Not like two people with unresolved tension, GDK pretending to be casual. It was intimate in the way only familiarity can be. Easy, comfortable, lingering just a little too long. My hands stayed still in my lap. My breathing stayed even. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the urge to storm across the street. I didn't reach for my phone. I just watched them walk inside together like they had done it before. And something in me became very calm. It wasn't peace. It was clarity, a terrible kind, but clarity all the same. Because once you see the truth in full light, the confusion disappears. All that remains is the decision. I sat there for maybe 5 more minutes, staring at the entrance, even after they were gone. Like some part of my body needed extra time to catch up with what my mind had already accepted. My boyfriend had booked an anniversary dinner with his ex, while I was working overtime to pay for a wedding he was still actively upgrading. That was the fact. Nothing he said later could make it smaller. Nothing he explained could make it innocent. I started the car and drove home. Not fast, not recklessly, just directly. The apartment was silent when I walked in. And for the first time in months, silence felt useful. I set my keys on the kitchen table, took off my coat, opened my laptop, and pulled up every wedding document we had. Venue, catering, photographer, DJ, florist, rentals. Contract after contract, page after page. Most people probably imagine the worst part of betrayal is the moment you catch it. For me, it was what came after, that quiet hour at the kitchen table, the one where my whole future stopped being emotional and started becoming paperwork. I grabbed a notepad and wrote down the only things that mattered now. Vendor name, deposit amount, cancellation deadline, refund policy, contact email. My handwriting was neat. Too neat, probably. Like if I kept the lines straight enough, the rest of me wouldn't come apart. The venue was the biggest expense. 30% already paid. Another large payment due soon. We were still just inside the cancellation window, where the second installment hadn't processed. That mattered. The photographer's deposit was non-refundable, but the date could be released if notice was given early enough. That mattered too. Catering was safer than I expected. The decorator was more complicated. Everything had a clause, a deadline, a number attached to regret. At 9:31, my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Work dinner is dragging. Might grab one drink after with the team. A tired face emoji. I looked at the message for a long time. Then I placed my phone back on the table without answering. A few minutes later, I sent my first cancellation email. Short, professional, controlled. Due to personal circumstances, the wedding is being canceled. Please confirm the refund amount according to the signed agreement. I read it once before sending. Then I moved on to the next vendor. And the next. By the third email, my mind had fully shifted into logistics mode. Not because I wasn't hurt, because if I let myself feel everything all at once, I wouldn't get anything done. At 10:08, my phone lit up again. Daniel, can you transfer 2,000 euros from the joint savings tonight? The decorator needs confirmation for the upgraded lighting package. That message actually made me laugh, quietly, briefly. The kind of laugh that comes from shock, not humor. There he was, sitting in a restaurant with Clara under anniversary lighting, and still trying to spend my overtime money on the wedding he was betraying in real time. I opened the decorator portal. He had already approved the upgraded package earlier that afternoon. Of course he had. That was the moment the last soft corner inside me hardened. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't unresolved feelings. It wasn't someone making one reckless mistake and drowning in regret. This was a man entirely comfortable living two separate lives at once. I finished the rest of the emails. Then I changed the password to the wedding website. Then I sat back in my chair and looked at the dark apartment around me. Everything was still, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like the last hour of something already over. And somewhere across the city, Daniel still thought he was out enjoying a secret dinner while I waited for him to come back. What he didn't know yet was that by the time he returned, there would be no wedding left to return to. By the time I closed my laptop, the apartment felt different. Not empty. Not yet. Just reorganized in a way that hadn't caught up to the physical space. The emails were sent. The contracts were in motion. The decision had already been made. All that was left now was the part people usually imagine comes first. The confrontation. Except I wasn't thinking about shouting. I was thinking about completion. I stood up from the kitchen table and walked into the bedroom. His side of the closet looked exactly the same as it had that morning. Pressed shirts, jackets arranged by color, shoes lined up neatly. Everything about it suggested permanence. That illusion didn't last long. I pulled 2 storage boxes from the hallway closet and set them on the bed. For a moment, I just stood there, looking at his things. 3 years, not in memories, in objects. And then I started packing. Not violently, not angrily, methodically. Shirts first, folded the way he liked them, sleeves tucked cleanly, no wrinkles. Then the jackets, then the jeans, then the shoes, placed carefully at the bottom of the box so they wouldn't crush anything else. There's something unsettling about how calm you can be when something is already over in your mind. No second guessing, no hesitation, just steps. By the time I finished the first box, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel, a photo, a cocktail glass sitting on a dark wooden table, dim lighting, a slice of orange on the rim, caption, surviving. There was a napkin in the corner of the photo. The restaurant logo was visible, the same one from the reservation. He hadn't even noticed, or he hadn't cared enough to hide it. I locked my phone and set it aside. Then I reached for the second box. His watch cases, his spare belts, the cologne he only wore when he wanted attention. That one made me pause for half a second. Then I placed it in the box with everything else. The bathroom came next. Half the cabinet cleared in under 10 minutes. Toothbrush, razor, skincare he barely used but insisted on keeping. Everything placed neatly into a smaller container. No rushing, no mess, just removal. By the time I carried the last box into the living room, it had been just under an hour. 4 boxes total. Stacked cleanly by the front door, I added his coat on top. Folded, aligned. Then one last thing, the framed sample of our wedding invitation. Cream paper, minimalist font, His choice. I had argued for something simpler. He said it looked cheap. I took it off the wall and placed it on top of the boxes, front and center, so it would be the first thing he saw. I went back to the kitchen and sat down again, opened my laptop. A reply from the venue was already waiting. Cancellation confirmed. Partial refund approved, minus administrative fees. I read the number twice. Almost 6,000 euros saved. I leaned back in the chair, not relieved. Just certain. Because every confirmation email, every processed cancellation, every refunded amount, it all said the same thing in a different language. You made the right call. At 12:07 a.m., I heard the sound of heels in the hallway, then keys. Then the lock turning. I didn't move. I stayed exactly where I had been earlier that evening, laptop open, hands resting on the table. The same position he had left me in. The door opened. Daniel stepped inside, and everything paused for about 2 seconds. His eyes landed on the boxes immediately, 4 of them, stacked by the door like something already scheduled to leave. The coat. The invitation. He didn't look confused. He looked annoyed. "What is this?" he asked, dropping his keys onto the counter. His tone wasn't cautious. It wasn't worried. It was irritated, like I had interrupted something important. I turned the laptop slightly toward him, then stopped. "No, not yet. I packed your things," I said calmly. "You can take them tonight." He blinked once, then let out a short breath through his nose. "Are you serious right now?" I didn't answer. He walked further into the apartment, loosening his collar like the conversation was already exhausting him. "All of this," he gestured vaguely at the boxes, "because I was late coming home?" I watched him for a moment. Still no panic. Still no guilt. Just frustration at inconvenience. "I'm not doing this," he continued. "I had a work dinner. It ran long. That happens." His voice picked up speed, the way it always did when he thought he could talk his way through something. And even if it didn't, normal people don't pack someone's life into boxes like a psycho over nothing. Nothing. I turned the laptop toward him, opened the email. The reservation confirmation. Name, time, date, anniversary table if possible. He looked at the screen for maybe 2 seconds, then leaned back and rolled his eyes. Not shock, not fear, annoyance. "Seriously?" he said. "That's what this is about?" I didn't interrupt. He waved a hand dismissively. "Clara and I ran into each other recently. We decided to catch up. That's it." His tone was flat, casual, practiced. "That note?" he added, pointing vaguely at the screen. "Restaurants put stuff like that automatically. It doesn't mean anything." I let him finish. Every word, every excuse, every attempt to shrink something that wasn't small. Then I spoke. "I canceled the wedding." Silence. Real silence this time. His expression changed. Not immediately. It took a second to land. Then his eyebrows pulled together. "What do you mean you canceled it?" "I mean the venue, the catering, the photographer, all of it." I kept my voice even, measured. Emails are already sent. For the first time since he walked in, he stopped moving. Then came the question. Not about Clara, not about us, not about why. "What about the deposits?" I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was exactly what I expected. "Some are refundable," I said. "Some aren't." His jaw tightened. "You had no right to do that without talking to me." I tilted my head slightly. "I'm the one paying for most of it. And I'm the one you were celebrating an anniversary with tonight." That landed, not emotionally, logically. The room went quiet again. Daniel looked at the boxes, then back at me, then laughed. Short. Sharp. "You're acting like a jealous child." I shrugged. "The boxes are ready." He didn't move. Instead, he crossed his arms and leaned against the counter, like this was still a debate he could win. "You're blowing this way out of proportion," he said. "It was dinner. Adults are allowed to talk to people from their past. Adults are also allowed to end engagements when their partner lies to their face," I replied. His eyes narrowed slightly. "What lie?" So I listed them, calmly. Work dinner, across town, co-workers. Then I looked at him. Red dress, restaurant 15 minutes away. Clara. He exhaled sharply through his nose. You followed me? Yes. He shook his head, almost laughing. Wow, so now you're stalking me too? I didn't react, didn't defend, didn't explain, because none of that mattered anymore. If you had told me you wanted to reconnect with her, I said, I would have ended this months ago. His expression hardened. You're twisting this. No, I said quietly. I'm finishing it. Another pause. Longer this time. He glanced at the boxes again, then at the door, then back at me. Where am I supposed to go? He asked. I didn't hesitate. Clara seems like a good option. For a moment, I thought he might argue again, push harder, raise his voice. Instead, he grabbed his phone, walked to the door, and pointed at the boxes. You expect me to carry all of this alone? I'll help, I said, not out of kindness, out of efficiency. Because I wanted it done. We moved the boxes in silence. The hallway was empty. The elevator ride quieter than anything we had said to each other in weeks. He kept texting the entire time, probably her. When we reached the building entrance, a car was already waiting. Of course it was. He had somewhere to go. We loaded the boxes into the trunk, one by one. No rush, no drama. Just the sound of things being placed exactly where they needed to be. He turned back to me before getting in. No apology. No explanation. Just that same look. You're going to regret this, he said. I met his eyes. No, I replied. He rolled his eyes, then got into the car. The door closed. The trunk shut. And just like that, he was gone. No shouting. No final scene. Just a car disappearing down the street with everything that no longer belonged in my life. I stood there for a few seconds after, not because I was waiting, just because the quiet felt different. Then I turned around, went back inside, and closed the door behind me. The apartment felt larger the moment I walked back in. Not physically, but in the way silence expands when something heavy is finally removed. I stood in the living room for a few ZDK just looking around. Half the closet was empty. The hallway felt cleaner. Even the air seemed still, not peaceful, just settled. I locked the door, set my keys on the table, and sat down on the couch. My phone lit up almost immediately. Daniel. 3 messages, back to back. You're insane. We need to talk like adults. Canceling everything like that is financial abuse. I read them once. No reaction. No spike of anger. No urge to defend myself. Just recognition. Even now, he wasn't asking what went wrong. He was reframing it, shifting the weight, trying to make the ending look like my fault. I blocked his number. Then I went through everything else. Messages, social media, email, one by one, until there was nothing left that connected us directly. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was immediate. Clean. For the first time in months, there were no pending conversations waiting to drain me. No explanations I owed. No tension sitting just under the surface. Just quiet. I leaned back into the couch and closed my eyes for a moment. Not to rest. To check something. To see if the emotion would finally hit now that everything was done. It didn't. Not in the way people expect. There was no breakdown. No sudden wave of grief. Just a steady awareness that something had ended exactly when it needed to. I stood up and walked into the bedroom. The closet looked different now. Not empty, just honest. What was mine was still there. What wasn't. That clarity made everything easier. I changed into something comfortable, washed my face, and turned off the lights. Sleep came faster than I expected. Not deep, but uninterrupted. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. My mind was already moving, not emotionally, practically. I made coffee and sat back at the kitchen table, the same spot from the night before. Opened my laptop. Checked my email. More replies had come in overnight. The photographer confirmed the date had been released. Catering acknowledged the cancellation and outlined the refund schedule. The DJ sent a short message. Professional, polite, detached. No questions. No curiosity. Just business. I appreciated that more than I expected, because there was something grounding about it. While my personal life had shifted overnight, the rest of the world was still operating on timelines and terms and agreements. I went through everything one by one, marked what had been confirmed, noted what was still pending, calculated what I had lost, calculated what I had saved. By the end of it, the numbers were clear. I had lost some money, but far less than I would have if I had waited. That mattered. Not just financially, but as proof. Proof that I had acted early enough to protect myself. Around 9 o'clock, my phone started lighting up again. Different names this time. Daniel's cousin. One of his friends. Then my sister. I already knew what that meant. He had started talking, or more accurately, he had started rewriting. My sister called instead of texting. I answered. "Hey," she said carefully. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." A pause. What actually happened? I leaned back in the chair and stared at the wall for a second, then gave her the short version. "Daniel had dinner with Clara last night," I said, while telling me he was at a work event. Another pause, then a quiet exhale. "Yeah," she said, "that sounds about right." I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it confirmed something I hadn't wanted to admit before. This hadn't come out of nowhere. Other people had seen pieces of it too. They just hadn't said anything. Or maybe I hadn't wanted to hear it. After the call, I opened the wedding group chat. Dozens of messages already. Confusion, questions, speculation. I didn't read them. I typed one message. Short. Direct. "The wedding has been canceled due to personal circumstances. All vendors have been notified. I apologize for any inconvenience and appreciate your understanding." I read it once, then sent it. Then left the group. No explanation, no details, no invitation for discussion. About 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered out of habit. "Evelyn." "Daniel." Different phone, same voice. I hung up before he could finish, then blocked that number too. Whatever he wanted to say now, it didn't matter, because the part where his words could change anything was already over. The rest of the morning passed quietly. I finished organizing the remaining vendor emails, closed the shared wedding account, transferred what was left back into my personal savings. Each step felt like closing a door. Not forcefully, just completely. By lunchtime, everything that had tied me to that future was either canceled, refunded, or erased. All that remained was the absence of it. And strangely, that felt lighter than holding on to something that had already broken. The next few days didn't feel dramatic. They felt organized. Like everything that had been building quietly for months was now unwinding in the exact same way, step by step. Work helped. It always does. Containers still arrived late. Schedules still broke. People still needed answers that didn't care about your personal life. And I liked that. Because nothing at work pretended to be something it wasn't. If something went wrong, you saw it. You fixed it. No hidden versions. No double lives. During lunch breaks, I kept closing things out. Final confirmations from vendors. Refund timelines. Accounts that needed to be shut down completely. By the third day, almost everything was resolved. Clean, contained, finished. Daniel tried 2 more times to reach me, once from another unknown number, once through email. The message was long, not emotional. Strategic. "We need to talk like adults. You're destroying 3 years over a misunderstanding. Nothing even happened." I read it once, then deleted it, blocked the address. Because the most interesting part of that message wasn't what he said. It was what he didn't. No apology. No acknowledgement of the lie. No explanation for the reservation. Just minimization. Reduction. An attempt to shrink something that had already been fully seen. A few days later, one of our mutual friends sent me a message. Not gossip. Just information. Daniel had been seen out again. Same restaurant area. Same woman. Clara. Twice in 1 week. Apparently, he wasn't hiding it anymore. According to the friend, he had already started telling people that maybe the wedding ending was for the best, that we weren't really compatible, that things had been off for a while. I read the message, then set my phone down, because there was something almost predictable about it. When people can't control the outcome, they try to control the story. And if that means rewriting you into the problem, they will. It didn't bother me. Not because I didn't care what people thought, but because the version of events he was telling required one thing I no longer had: participation. I wasn't there to argue, to defend, to correct. So eventually, it would just become noise. That same evening, I got another message, this time from his cousin. Short, careful. He said you kicked him out in the middle of the night. I stared at the screen for a second, then typed back. He left with everything that belonged to him. Sent. No follow-up. No elaboration. Because the truth didn't need help. It just needed to exist long enough for people to notice the gaps in whatever else they were being told. 2 weeks passed. My schedule went back to normal hours. No more overtime. No more calculating how many extra shifts I needed to cover someone else's expectations. The money that used to disappear into wedding deposits stayed in my account. The apartment settled into a rhythm that felt mine again. Quiet in a way that didn't feel empty. Just uninterrupted. One night, I opened my laptop and saw the folder still sitting there. June wedding. I hadn't touched it since that night. I clicked on it. Inside were all the plans, contracts, invoices, seating charts, a future that had once felt structured, certain. I looked at it for a long moment, not nostalgic, not emotional, just aware. Then I right-clicked, deleted. No hesitation, no second thought. The folder disappeared. And with it, the last trace of something that had already ended long before I acknowledged it. People kept asking me the same question after that. Not directly, but in different forms. Why didn't you try to fix it? Why didn't you talk it through? Why didn't you give him a chance to explain? The answer never changed. Because by the time someone is comfortable lying to your face while you're building a future together, the future is already gone. There's nothing left to fix. All you're doing at that point is deciding how long you're willing to pretend it isn't.